everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla King, and if you're new to this channel, I tell interesting or scary stories that I found online. If you have any scary stories of your own, you are welcome to contact me on Instagram or even post on the channel's subreddit page where there's a link down below in the description. But for now, enjoy the video. My great-grandmother was a bit of a spooky lady. She passed away when I was 11 years old. But I remember she always told stories about a ghost that she said lived with her, named Boo. She said that he had been with her and followed her to several different houses with her since she was a child. She even said that Boo would come and visit with her, and they would talk and have full conversations about stuff. She said that he was just a regular-looking man that was thin and wore a black hat, but he wasn't scary looking at all. Her stories were always well known amongst our family and fairly light-hearted. She blamed everything on Boo, and we were all used to her always talking about him, and we all laughed about it and never thought much of it. We all just thought she was making stuff up to entertain us, I guess. Thankfully, none of us ever saw or heard Boo, only her. It was just a joke in our family. We all loved listening to Boo stories. When my great-grandmother passed away, my grandmother, her daughter, said that Boo came to live with her. Again, we all just thought it was a running joke and laughed about her stories. She would tell about Boo, making noises and moving stuff around and hiding stuff from her. She eventually started talking about how Boo would come and visit with her too, and they would talk to each other. Again, no one thought she was serious. It was just an ongoing family joke, I thought. Well, my grandmother passed away before Christmas, just this past year. And I've been living in her old house since the beginning of the year. Since I've been here, I've heard loud banging, like something big falling, coming from other rooms. But when I go to see what fell, nothing is out of place. This has happened almost every night since I've been here. On the nights when I have company sleep over, nothing strange ever happens. It only ever happens when I'm alone here. I've heard what sounds like something hitting the wall, but no one is there. I've heard my keys, makeup, clothes, beauty products just disappear and then show back up later where they were supposed to be. I've gotten to where I just talk out loud and say, "Boo, please return to me. I'd appreciate it." Or, "Boo, please be quiet because I'm trying to sleep." And the noise will stop. Or I'll find what I was looking for. I'm not scared, but it's just totally outside of my comfort zone. However, I'm pretty apprehensive about the thought of him visiting me and be able to see him. I don't think I want that to happen, and it makes me a bit nervous to think about. I haven't said anything much to my family about it because I don't want them to think I'm crazy, so I just stay silent mostly. But I have started making little jokes about Boo doing stuff and him pulling pranks. My family just laughs at me though, just like I always laughed at both my grandmothers. This happened one evening in the summer of 1984 or thereabouts. I was a teenager walking around with 3 friends in the general area of the suburban neighborhood where we all lived. There wasn't a lot to do, so it was common for kids our age to stroll around at night, talking, laughing, and getting into minor mischief. There was a large wild area with streams, a swampy area, lots of trees, and a rocky area with mounds of dirt. It was an area of several acres, mostly surrounded by single-family homes and a few adjacent neighborhoods. There are houses on 3 sides, and on the 4th, a large empty field, an elementary school, and some municipal buildings. There was a narrow asphalt path that ran through the middle of the area, presumably to provide a way for kids to walk to and from the school. The whole area was referred to as the Path. It had a reputation amongst the kids as a scary and dangerous place. In my mind as a child, the Manson family, or the Shrewsbury equivalent, was living there, holding satanic rituals and sacrificing kids like me. In reality, the scariest thing was older kids smoking pot and drinking pilfered bottles of Michelob in the woods or making out in shady leafy hollows. So on this particular evening, it was Frank, Keith, Brian, and me wandering around aimlessly. We decided to walk down a dead-ended street and cut through the yards into the woods of the path. It was dusk, the light fading completely as we cut through, stepping over an old stone wall and into the dense underbrush. We didn't have flashlights, and the only way we could see where we were going was to spark the flint wheel on an empty big lighter one of us had. It provided a quick dim strobe flash by which we could get our bearings. We picked our way single file through the underbrush to a narrow flowing brook. There was a fallen log across the stream, so it was a quick 1-2 step to cross it. On the other side, as we knew from playing in the woods, was a narrow dirt path that ran perpendicular to and intersected with the asphalt paved main path off to our left, maybe 100 yards away. To the right, the path continued through the dense brush and made a 90-degree turn and traversed a slight rise through a forested area, ending in the large field by the school. One by one, we quick stepped across the log over the stream and pushed through the bushes onto the overgrown dark, narrow path. I was third in line, Frank and Keith having gone first. As I emerged from the brush, and as Brian was making his way across, I heard Keith's voice, shrill and frightened. "There's someone standing right there." Frank and Keith were to my left, facing in my direction. I whipped my head to the right, and sure enough, there was a man standing there, not 6 feet from me. It wasn't a tree. It was just a dark, silent shape, appeared solid. A man-shaped blotch darker than the darkness. No question. A man standing there. I could make out the round brim of a hat that appeared to be tilted back on his head, so the outline was ovalish, not a horizontalish line of hat pulled low across the forehead. The figure was silent, unmoving. As I stared in terror, the figure shifted slightly, maybe turning or raising an arm. Somehow my impression of this was not movement, but a subtle change in shape of the silhouette. It was unclear what the movement was, but it was just that it was slightly different outline, but it displayed no perceptible motion. We broke and ran away in panic, truly scared for sure, but laughing and hooting hysterically, leaving poor Brian behind to be murdered. We reached the asphalt path and stopped, catching our breath, with Brian arriving a few seconds behind us. He hadn't seen a thing and was somewhat perplexed, to say the least. As we stood panting and jabbering under a streetlight at the south end of the path, we compared what we had seen. Frank and Keith concurred what I had seen, a slim, silent man in a hat. Then Keith said, "When I was looking at it, it sort of changed. Like it didn't move, but it changed shape." That gave me goosebumps, since that was the same subjective observation that I had had. Brian didn't see anything. Poor Brian. The dirt path was very overgrown, with weeds and bushes, all but obscuring it. It was disused by that point, so it wasn't easy going and wasn't a route one would take as a reasonable choice, especially at night. This is what made it particularly frightening, to encounter someone standing silent and motionless exactly where we happened to emerge onto the path after crossing the brook. Who was it, and why were they just standing there? How did they get there, and why didn't they speak to us? Why were they wearing what appeared to be a farmer's hat? All of these things flashed quickly through my mind when I saw the figure, but in one sudden jolt, arriving all at once as a giant "what the hell" in a primal part of my brain. My impression was that of a slim man in his 30s or 40s, about 5'8" to 10, kind of the same build as my doctor as a kid, who always reminded me of the guy from the Civil War era because he was short, thin, and serious. Was it one of the residents of the neighborhood who, perturbed by the obnoxious teenagers cutting through his yard, had somehow silently and quickly threaded his way through the dense, dark underbrush in order to menacingly glower at us in silence? It could have been, and if so, that in itself is terrifying. Bravo on scouring us for life, Dr. B. I am still in touch with Frank, and we talk about that experience from time to time. Nearly 40 years later, it still gives me chills to recall the encounter. One of my good friends in high school had this lake house. It was given to his parents by their grandparents, and they lived in this house from 90 to 93. One day in 93, his mom woke him and his younger sister up and left the house. Mind you, it was 2 to 3 a.m. They went to a restaurant that was open 24/7 and stayed there until the sunrise and went home, packed all of their clothing and other important things and left the house. They never went back, and his mother will not talk about what happened. They still own this property. It has 2 homes on it and is lakefront, probably worth millions. The power is still on and his dad comes and checks on it every so often. So, in hearing that story, we of course went to the lake house, pulling up a motion sensor floodlight flicked on and stayed on. Unlocked the deadbolt, which required a key to open on both sides, and walked in. Instantly, you got that creepy feeling like someone was watching you. We walked around for about half an hour, walking up the stairs and unlocking another door with a deadbolt on both sides. And man, was it eerie. All the furniture was still set up, his sister's nursery still intact, and a tea kettle still on the stove. Just straight up creepy in every way. Finally we go to leave and decide to go through the garage. I have the keys and, again, you had to have the key to unlock it from the inside. I'm trying to open the door and turn around to get a light, just in time to see a rock come from somewhere down the hall and hit my foot. Staring at all three of my friends and not seeing them do anything with their arms or leg or anything else, I decide to try and unlock the door more rapidly. Finally find the right key and put it in the keyhole. As soon as I do, the garage door opens about 2 feet, and thanks to the motion sensor floodlight that is still on, I can see a chair in the garage. The chair proceeds to be thrown against the wall with a violence I can't describe, and the garage door is slammed shut. I turn around to say let's get the hell out of here, and see a rock come from the darkness and hit the wall with a lot of force right next to my head. At this point, I'm done. We run back to the stairs down the basement, and for the safety of the door we came in, the door which requires a key on either side to lock or unlock and we left unlocked is locked. Freaking out and hearing what sounds like heavy running footsteps upstairs, I am panicking to find the key. Finally I find it and unlock the door. We run to the next door, and you guessed it, locked. Again, find the right key as the footsteps are getting louder and coming down the stairs. We run out the door and it gets left open by the last person out, and then as we go to shut it, the door is slammed shut and instantly you hear the deadbolt get locked. At this point we are only focusing on getting out of this place. We run to the truck and all 4 of us pile in, and as soon as the truck starts, every single light in the house comes on at once. My buddy slams it into reverse and we are flying down this very long driveway. As soon as our tires leave the gravel and hit the pavement, every light in the house turns off, leaving it in absolute darkness. Something very, very bad is in that house. Not sure what, but I'll never go back, and I absolutely believe in ghosts, demons, etc. Believe it or not, this is the short version of the story, and the backstory of the house is even creepier. When I was around 11 or 12 years old, living in the UK, I went through a period of 4 months where at nights I could never sleep all the way through at home. No matter how tired I was, or what time I went to bed, I would always wake up around 2 to 3 a.m. If I slept at my grandmother's house, no problem at all. Every night that I woke up, it would be silent in the house, except for a light tapping sound coming from the corner of my bedroom, where my wardrobe used to be. Every night I would hear this tapping noise, and it would keep me from being able to fall back to sleep. The tapping sound was never continuous. It would tap for different lengths of time, then stop, before continuing again. This counted out my mother's, it must be next door neighbor's clock, when I told her about it. Creaking wardrobe doors, and just my imagination, were 2 other explanations that my mother gave me. Also, I'd use that wardrobe daily, when getting changed into fresh clothes, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I remember one night I decided enough was enough. I had spent about an hour lying in bed listening to the tapping and struggling to sleep. I jumped out of bed and went over to my wardrobe, grasped both of the handles, and flung the doors open. There was a pause of about 1 minute, while I had the handles in my hands, once again pooping myself. As the doors flung open, a t-shirt that I had on one of my hangers hit me in the face, and I feel like someone had punched me in the stomach. I remember lying on the floor in my room, not sure for how long, but it was like time just jumped forward 3 hours and my parents were getting up for work. I said nothing and went about my day as if nothing had happened. That was the last night that I ever woke up in the early hours of the morning, and the last time I ever heard that tapping sound. As I've grown older, I've spoken to my mother about it all, and she has told me many stories about our old house, and I've returned the favor with my other experiences. She said that because I was young and got scared easily, she always tried to find a rational excuse for whatever spooky scenario I ever told her I was in. Any ideas? Explanations? For a bit of backstory, I live in a small southern city with a history dating back to the Civil War. The apartment building I call home, and have called home for almost 4 years now, was built in 1936 to be apartments instead of existing as a house, first only to then be converted into apartments. The walls and floors in this place are tremendously paper thin, as I can hear my downstairs neighbor's TV and my downstairs neighbor as if she's talking loud enough. There's squirrels in the walls that I can hear scrambling from time to time, and I can hear every time the front door opens and shuts, generally because people slam it. Yes, I know there's rational, logical explanations for all sorts of things. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for the heavy footsteps I sometimes hear in my downstairs neighbor's apartment, which sounds like she puts on her heaviest pair of hiking boots, which I will be surprised if she owns, and paces, doing her best to stomp heavily with every step. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for the knocking I'll sometimes hear on the bathroom wall, which sounds very much like my other neighbor is rapping his knuckles against the side of the wall. I'm even sure there's a logical explanation for the shadow of the arm I'm sure I saw in my dark kitchen once and only once back in 2020, staring at it as I was from the living room. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for any and all little creepy things that have happened while I've lived there. I can find no explanation for this next part. This is about a week ago. I was about to go to sleep, sitting on the couch. I sleep on my couch because the living room is the only room I can somewhat climate control, be through heaters or fans, and playing some solitaire to sort of relax. It was a particularly noisy evening that night. The train was whistling and groaning as it made its way down the tracks. The squirrels were scrambling in the walls, and I could hear one of my neighbors moving around. In truth, I was a little unnerved by all the noises. But then, in the midst of everything else, I hear it. Uh-oh. It was a small voice, toneless, either a young woman or a child. It wasn't muffled, didn't sound like it was coming from a TV or from one of my neighbors. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen or my bedroom. I stop, paralyzed, listening and hear nothing else. Ever since then, I've heard nothing else and have no explanation for it. There's no grand ghost story attached to this place, but the only thing that comes close being a half-remembered story from the old landlord about some little girl going missing here at some point. Even if he hadn't heard about it himself, had only heard about it from a woman doing research for a ghost walk. It could be nothing, and I probably won't ever hear anything else, just like the Civil War nurse at my college. But I don't know what I heard. I know what it wasn't, even if I don't know what it was. That's what counts, right? And that's it for the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you would like to support the channel in any way, there are links down below in the description for stuff like Patreon or buy me a coffee or even to buy my actual book itself. I'm pretty sure if you guys love these stories, you're gonna love my book as well. Hopefully. Anyway, I hope you guys have an amazing day. Until next time, bye bye.